A political activist with morals. Today, I have Marlene joining me on the 180 Shift podcast. Let's roll the intro. Okay, so sadly, Ellie will not be joining us tonight. So, I will punch the boba once for me, once for Ellie. Whoops, I made a big mess. Okay, so, yes. So today I have joining me Marlene. Marlene, can you just give a brief introduction, some context of who you are?
Well, who I am is a entrepreneur woman, living and working and creating in Southern California, mostly in the South Bay, but I reach up into the West Side, down to the bottom of Long Beach, and I pretty much make California my playground.
That is fantastic. How long have you been involved in politics?
Well, I started in politics in 2013 after feeling extremely apathetic, thinking we had one candidate, a particular woman, and we were pretty much stuck with that woman, and there was nothing we could do because she was kind of, kind of the leader of the show. And I didn't align with some of the things that they were telling us in the 70s when we were teenagers in school.
Yeah, so this backs up even further. So let's talk more about your personal life. Your mother. Tell me more about who you are outside of the entrepreneurial political side of things.
Okay, so I'm a mother of 4, grandmother of 2, and I'm a woman that likes to be very, very busy. I'm also a very generous person, so I like to be in contribution. Wherever there is someone, something, some entity that needs contribution and generosity and an uplift, I have the capability to do that, and so I'm there. So I'm supporting people all the time a lot in politics, I have to say. And also personal and friends and family and in real estate too.
Yeah, so let's jump back to, let's say, the 70s. So who were the political figures of the time that were pushing these values that you didn't agree with?
Well, we had a gal that's kind of interesting. She owned a very famous magazine, and her name was Helen Gurley Brown. Yeah. And she was literally telling us girls what we could and could not do. And they were not good things that she was saying. Some of them I can't even say in this podcast. But they were really encouraging abortions. And here I am, a 14-year-old girl. Thank goodness I got to go home to my Cuban mother and ask her. And she's like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
But it was a big push and a big encouragement for the young girls to do things that maybe they were taught differently at home. And now they're giving them, the girls, the okay. And Steinem was huge. And on the political front, that would have been Hillary Clinton.
Wow. Yeah. And yeah, I'm sure we all know the things that are being said about Hillary Clinton now. Very disturbing. But, backing up, we're seeing this movement of the bra burners, the abortionists, these women who claim to be for freedom and rights and choice and all these seemingly wonderful things. But let's back up even further into what the United States of America looked like culturally for women in, let's say the 40s, 50s.
Right. Well, I wasn't around during that time. I was born in 55, so I can talk about the 60s. It was amazing. It was amazing free time where you got to run around and do what you wanted. There was a commercial every night at 10 o'clock, okay? And this is what it said. Parents, do you know where your children are? And it wasn't a joke. It was a reminder. It's 10 o'clock at night. Go find your kids in case they're not home. That was standard.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
That was standard. Parents, do you know where your children are? 10 o'clock at night.
They're eating chips and they're like, Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they're running up and down the street, having fun, chasing each other. Very different from what we see today. And then in the 70s as well. And in the 70s, we were being taught to burn the bra. And of course, here I come from a very cultural family, and I went home and I said that to my mom, and she said, "No, you're not doing that."
No.
And she didn't understand it. I didn't fully understand it, but we just didn't adopt it. We continued with the things that we were raised with. And one of the things that I miss the most, Tara, is where's Grandma and Grandpa? Where's Auntie and Uncle? They lived with you. They were at your house all day. They were, talking to you about things that you wouldn't learn from someone else. And they were disciplining you, too. You knew that if your auntie got mad at you, you're in trouble because now your mom's going to get mad at you.
Yeah.
Those things occurred. And I look everywhere and I was like, where's everyone's aunt and uncle? Where are the grandparents?
Yeah. It was just, what do they call them? The flower children?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Just out in the fields. Yeah. So your mother was from Cuba? Is that?
I was born in Cuba as well.
Okay.
And my mother was born in Cuba, and she got a job at the Copacabana, which was the most famous place in the world at the time. And she said she was 17. She wasn't. She was like 15. And she got a job, and she met a very wealthy American man, and he married her and brought me to America.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Pre-Castro, yeah.
Wow.
So I got to live a fantastic life on Long Island.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate any of what that was like specifically?
The living on Long Island?
Yeah.
Free. I mean, I had my Stingray. That's all I needed. And I would jump on that, and my mom would say, you need to be home at 12 for your sandwich and at 5 o'clock for dinner. That's it. And then we ran around and had a good time.
And Stingray is
a type of bicycle.
Okay. All right. See, that's how far out of touch I am. Okay.
No, you're not out of touch. I'm really digging deep here.
No, that's so sweet. No, okay. So just to give you some context of kind of what I refer to a lot, I've basically had this persona of traditional wife. I'm a traditional wife. I'm trad wife Tara. And what does that mean for me? I am I actually try to look back to 40s and 50s women. And I wish that more women today were acting like that.
Yes.
Because what would you say, I know that you and your family weren't here maybe at that time, but what do you know about that era?
Well, I think it was a tail end of that era. I got to see some of the things that I got to see. For instance, every afternoon at 3 o'clock, all the women got together. The kids were outside playing, and they would have coffee and pound cake. And that was social media.
Yeah.
That was social media. You find out who's pregnant, who's not pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah. Spilling the tea.
Does so-and-so's husband have a girlfriend?
Oh,
I mean, you would find out things like who's moving, who's not moving, those sorts of things, how the grandparents are doing, because most of the families, especially back east, your homes are tri-level, so they're large homes with three different floors, and grandma and grandpa would live someplace, and then the kids are running around downstairs and that sort of thing. And I can remember, and you just brought this to mind, when it was very cold out, and it snows, sometimes for 3 months on Long Island. And my mom would make noodles, homemade noodles, and she would dry them on a sheet where the sun would come in through the window. And we would peek. Are they ready yet? Are the noodles ready yet? And then eventually the noodles would be ready. But that was home, as mom's making noodles, homemade noodles at home. And she would say, later on in this latter part of the 60s, she said, you're allowed to have one TV dinner like a week. And we thought it was like the best thing ever. We couldn't believe. We didn't understand what this food in this tin was. It was so different to the food that we had. And I was also raised in a Sicilian neighborhood. So if you want to know good food, move into a Sicilian neighborhood.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. It was probably a lot of just organic, like, just 3 ingredients.
Homemade, yeah. My mom and all the moms in the neighborhood, they wore aprons for sure. My mom wore pumps during the day when she was cleaning her home in a dress.
Yeah.
She did. And her hair was done and her makeup, and all the women the same. They just got up in the morning and looked fabulous and did their thing. And then when Dad came home in the evening, it was all about Dad and getting him his slippers. And, it was such a fabulous time. I really wish it could have been extended to further.
And we've changed so much from, it always reminds me of Proverbs 31, the Proverbs 31 woman, the woman who she kept her home a hearth, like when you're describing what it was like to watch the noodles dry, there was something, it's not just about the noodles, it's about the way that it feels to be home, to have a place to go home to. And it's biblical. It's biblical because that's the Proverbs 31 woman, is she keeps that hearth. She keeps that presence, that love, that energy in the house, so that even when you leave, you come back, you feel that love. You know you're loved. And a big part of that is a clean house, and food and healthy food and things taken care of, and a lot of that is now sexist ideas.
Isn't that something?
It's crazy. It's like upside down, and we've lost the hearth. And a lot of men, I think, crave the hearth, but they know better than to ask of that of a woman. They're all chasing,
Well, they don't know what's right and wrong in a woman's opinion anymore because it's all over the place. But I remember my family that lived in New York City, they didn't have yards in New York City. They lived in tenement housing, which is not bad. Tenement's kind of a strange word, but it's just apartments. I don't know if you've ever been to New York City, but there's apartments underground.
Oh, yeah.
There's apartments above, bakeries and supermarkets. And so to come out to the island to visit us was so great because we had acres of land behind our home. And so they would come out and we would barbecue and kids would chase each other. And one thing I do have to say, though, we did have a plastic transparent tablecloth on our kitchen table.
Even that, though, is iconic. Easy to clean.
Yeah. The table was not allowed to get old.
Yeah.
It had to look brand new 100 years later. And that's what the plastic, tablecloth was for.
See, those are old world values that that keep things, save money. They make things nicer. They keep things good longer. And it's so funny. So I watched this Lila Rose video. You know who Lila Rose is? She's that conservative female political talker, podcaster. I don't know. Anyway, but she did a video that said the 1940s housewife that's like modern. We like to think of that as the traditionalism, but that's a modern idea. The thing of the man going to the work 9 to 5 and the woman staying home and the man coming home and the woman taking care of the children by herself. She was saying that her argument was that that's a modern idea. We like to think of that as the old days, but that's actually modern. What's your opinion on that?
I believe it is modern because prior to that, women were actually working. So they weren't working at the office, they were working at the farm. They were getting up at, the break of dawn. So were the children, and feeding the chickens and milking the cows and feeding the animals and just starting the whole farm. And if you didn't have a farm of your own, you were supporting other farms. That's how you made your money and that's how you lived. So it was all in support of the farm. And that's the feeding of America, which we are in crisis. Crisis with the feeding of America. Nobody even knows what that is. There are children in mid-cities that do not know that an egg comes from a chicken. I've had people say that to me. They have no idea where milk comes from. They don't know that milk comes from a cow.
Oh boy.
They don't.
That's crazy.
How could they? And sometimes kids are fed straight from 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
That's a reality today. So I think that I was very privileged to live on Long Island with the kind of upbringing that I had. I don't know what was happening out here in California. I came out here in 1969, tail end of 69, and it was definitely hippie.
Yeah.
And I went straight to Manhattan Beach, and that was definitely hippie, and that was exciting.
What brought you there?
My mom just said, we're moving to California, Joe.
Oh, cool. Oh, very cool. The decision made, yeah.
And he's like, okay, hon, whatever you say. And we moved out here.
So how did you participate with the culture jumping forward into, the early 70s and the West Side flower child?
I cried a lot for a few months.
Really?
I didn't understand.
Did you feel rejected or did you just feel confused?
No, I was not raised in a setting where I'd ever feel rejected for anything.
That's good. That's awesome.
That was not my upbringing.
That's good.
But I didn't understand how girls could wear sandals to school. You were not allowed to do that on Long Island back then. You were not allowed to wear pants to school, even if it was snowing. You had your wool gear, your wool socks, and and your Oxfords, and when you got to class, your feet were frozen. Yes, they were. So what?
Yeah.
And so I come out here, and I saw things I'd never heard of before. I saw like chola queens and vatos, and that was interesting. Girls with like little razor blades in their hair.
Yeah.
And yes, and so that culture of which California already was deep into, you get to do whatever you want, nobody can stop you. And then from there, it went straight into the pot smoking, which I was not allowed to do.
And then onward from there, going into the 90s.
Yes.
Like a friend of mine must have been early 2000s. He did a song with, I think, Dr. Dre, or this is kind of like a mentor person in my life, but they put a pot leaf on their album cover.
Okay.
And then jump forward to 2019, I believe, and the hit single of that year was called Molly Percocet, which is, I think that's mixing two drugs, one called Percocet, one called Molly, and that was the hit single of that year. And this guy that I know, who's, a friend of mine from my church, was saying that he felt partially responsible for this hit.
Ouch.
And how far it's gotten,
Yeah.
how bad it's gotten, because he put a pot leaf on his album cover 20 years, him or his friends, his music collaborators decided to put a pot leaf on the album cover. And it just, it was a gateway, it was a gateway to all this other stuff.
It is. And I tell my kids, don't write down anything. Ever. Don't text. Don't write it down. Don't mail it unless you plan on it being your opinion for the rest of your life, because it's not going away.
Yes. And that's the confusing thing. Like, this is a bit of a tangent, but on an app like Snapchat, where a lot of this illegal stuff is happening. I mean, I've heard so many testimonies from people saying, my son, daughter, neighbor, friend bought something on Snapchat that they thought was pot, that they even thought was a harder drug, like Percocet or something. They bought it and then they died because it had fentanyl in it.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy because in the Snapchat, I had Snapchat a long time ago, and I remember, you see the terms and agreements and you just hit, yeah, agree, get out of there.
Yeah.
But, I deleted Snapchat a long time ago when I became a Christian, but I went back one day and I was like, oh yeah, I think I saw a thread about it on Facebook that explained what the terms and conditions of Snapchat actually say. And it says anything that you put in this app, send, save, receive, can and will be used against you in a court of law. And it just because it disappears from your phone, it stays on our files forever.
And the children don't understand that.
Yeah, they just don't get it. They just don't get it.
And they don't care because they don't understand what consequences yet. They're not mature enough to understand consequence. That happens when you're an adult. But I'd like to speak to something that you said. Let's say marijuana, okay? Pot. It was a different animal than it is today. It was very free-flowing. Just about, I didn't, because I came from a Cuban family and you don't want to get kicked out of America. So
yeah.
We didn't do any of that. But the pot that people were smoking then was pretty much pot that someone in town was growing, or so groups of maybe like hippies were growing somewhere. Very different from the drug regime that we have today, or the pot smoking regime. You have no idea where that pot's coming from.
Yeah.
Even if it's legalized, you still don't, because not everyone's buying from the, I forgot what the pot stores are.
Like a grower place.
Yeah, you don't always know where your pot's coming from. It's a different animal than it was before. It's also sprayed today, and I don't believe it was sprayed before. It just it was a plant that grew. And then after that, when we got into the 80s, and I was already out of high school, they were selling, or they were giving away pot and cocaine in little bags at the gates of the high school.
Why?
To addict children, to addict them.
Who was they? Was it the...
That has to be the Bush. It was the Bush era. Senior Bush. It was on his watch.
What's interesting now is with colleges, I'm just going to call out one, Claremont College. You know,
Okay.
I had a friend who went there, and I remember, she was one of my older friends. I was probably 17 at the time, but so this was probably 2017. She was telling me about the parties that Claremont College throws for them. Like, they throw the parties, and
That's crazy.
it's just common knowledge that there's all this, that's rave music, and then there's all these hype drugs. I don't remember the name of all of them, but they're just like pills. They're just pills, and they go hand in hand with raves, and the administration is aware that those pills are being passed out there. They're aware that everyone's drinking, but frankly, the drinking, the pills, mixing the pills with the drinks, you're just asking to die. But anyway, it was just interesting because this friend, she would just go to those parties. And here's the thing with Claremont College, it's an extremely high tuition. So part of that tuition literally goes to their party fund.
Isn't that something?
Where these kids are basically, like you said, being given a playground, a safe space to do drugs and just abuse substances and just, I don't know, sleep around. Like, I really don't understand what the point of that is.
I know that in the 70s, everyone knew who the kid or kids were, was just a couple of them. That would be the potheads.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of knew, and they're usually good, they're high, so they're really nice all the time.
Yeah.
And also the girls that were in trouble. Everyone knew the few handful of girls that were in trouble. And everyone else, I would say 98% of everyone else, was just kids going to school whose parents demanded certain things from them. Most of them, I would say, even in the 70s, the parents was at home. And if they were not at home, they were at home part-time. In other words, they would come home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to take care of the kids. That was still big in the 70s and even into the 80s, probably into the 90s. And then after that, there was a big shift after that. And the shift comes because I don't think it's so much that the woman wants to be out of her house. I think you can't afford it. When your mortgage was $500 versus $5,000, which is what it is today, you have to work. Yes.
And that's obviously a huge thing. And so let's talk about how that we came from this traditional motherhood of the hearth, the mother being the homemaker, and even before then, we had discussed briefly about the farmer wives, but then going into this era of the 70s. What was it like? 70s, 80s, 90s, like, where did that decline of present mothers go? Like, what do you think happened during those couple of decades?
I think that the families that were the most highly not protected, but the families that had financial situations. Maybe my dad was an engineer. He worked on the Gemini, which was the original spaceship that went up.
Oh my goodness.
And fell to the ground. But he had such a nice income that it didn't affect us like it maybe affected some of the other families.
Yeah.
So if you have a family where the income is lower by the dad as the costs go up, then the father sometimes has a limit on the amount of money that he can make, and she has to step in. And then I think there was a lot of pressure and push by different entities for the children to rebel. And the one that I remember the most, and I know she has a different view now, but the Roseanne Barr TV show. That is a perfect example. Mom and Dad were the two stupidest people you've ever met in your life. The kids were smart, they knew everything, and the parents knew nothing. And the parents would control and dominate and teach the parents, because the kids know everything. That shift it just created the biggest harm that you can, because and why the parents became subservient, I'm not understanding. But they did.
It's almost like the lack of the submission that the parents displayed from the children. It's almost like an allusion to the lack of presence, perhaps, that the children were experiencing. It's not that they're submissive or incompetent. It's just that they're too busy. Like you said, they're out.
Maybe
they're
tired.
both working.
Right,
yeah, they're
right.
both working and trying to support a household. And they just. So what do they lose? They lose the hearth. They lose that household, that love, that vibrancy. And I think that's where just the pure, resentment, I think, culturally towards parents. But stepping into the 2000s era, what do you think started happening there to motherhood?
Drugs, separation, grandparents and uncles moving away. Your viewers, they can look something up. It'll be fun. There's a word called chancleta.
Chancleta?
Yeah, spelled like Chancletta. It's a Cuban or Spanish version of a thong, the shoe.
A sandal. It's the sandal thing, right? Yeah.
It's the sandal that you
I've
throw.
heard about that.
My mom was an expert at throwing that sandal. Everybody's mom in the Sicilian neighborhood that I lived in knew how to throw that sandal. Yeah. And sometimes I swear it would come back into my mom's hand like a boomerang. Yeah. And so that shoe was omnipresent to the behavior of the children and the understanding that your mother is the boss, and wait till your father comes home.
Yeah.
If you think it's bad with mom, wait till your father comes home. There's no such thing anymore. That shifting and changing where the government, here's my answer to you, the government stepped in. The government stepped in and said, you're not allowed to slap your child. Well, that's my child, maybe my daughter. And I'm not promoting corporal punishment. I'm not. I have my own views and my own business. But the minute that a parent can't spank a child or can't do whatever it is that they are accustomed to in their upbringing from their own family or decisions they've made on how they want to raise the children, and the state comes in and becomes the parent. The interesting part is when the state comes in and becomes the parent and your child gets in trouble, your child goes to jail or prison. Who visits your child? The state doesn't visit your child. You do.
Yes.
When they're in prison. So it's very interesting. They're the parent during the time frame where they can dominate the child and teach the child this type of governmental rhetoric.
Yeah, it's funny that the government started stepping in and micromanaging the parent, but
that's what I think happened.
That's exactly right, though. The government will never love your child as much as you do. It's impossible. It's in our nature to love our child. Now, obviously, there are violent homes out there, but the percentage of things most of the time, when a parent is trying to discipline their child, it is coming from a place of love and like and then there's the other side of that, which is I love my child. I love my child so much, and and that's I think why wouldn't you say that churches need to come in and kind of like a family that's struggling with a very misbehaving child. It's good to go to like a local church, and ask for help, and tap into local, more family-based community solutions rather than exactly like the government. Like I knew a guy growing up who called, I think, CPS on his parents, and his parents, he knew what to say. He was a very smart kid, so he knew what to say to get his parents in trouble, and he got removed from his house. And he never saw them again. It would totally backfired, but it was just like, that's just one of many disasters that happens when the government, starts micromanaging the parent. But it's interesting because going back to what we previously discussed was the television at the 10 o'clock saying, hey, go wrangle your kids. You can literally tell on your parents when they do something that you don't agree with. And if you say the right words, you might just never see them again.
My mom said, don't bother calling the police. I'll call them for you.
Oh, my goodness.
So we were scared to death. We were like, she's even in charge of the police department? That's how but here we were, great students, great people, great neighbors, great friends, great family members, because we did have that love and respect, not just for others, but for ourselves as well. And I don't think it's that children don't want to be loving and respectful. I honestly think I don't think they really understand what that means and what that looks like. And as a grown woman, I'm confused about what it looks like today too. Yeah. Because it's a multifaceted thing, but really it shouldn't be. It should be something that you look at from specific terms of kindness and generosity and clarity and thinking about someone else as much as you think about yourself. And all those are gone. And we know I was right in the middle of the me movement. Me. It's all about me.
Yeah.
And we weren't allowed to do that at home. So
Yeah.
so much for that.
Yeah, exactly. The me movement. Yeah.
The me movement. But
That's
the
funny.
government will never love your child. The city of LA will never love your child. The United States government will never love your child, no matter what they say. You love your child.
Yeah.
And you care about what happens to your child. They can't. They're an entity. They're not a person. And the values are dependent on what 4 years we're at.
Yeah.
Who's governor? Who's mayor? And what they push, depending on what's in special interest needs. That's another thing we haven't discussed. Special interest. Why are we the only country that is so sprayed with glyphosate and all these different insecticides? You go to Europe, you go to Italy, it's the same bread that they were baking 5,000 years ago. You know, the same bread. They never allowed Monsanto to step foot in Europe or GMO. Did you know that?
No.
There's no GMO allowed. There never has been allowed. And no Monsanto. While we spray and spray, every bit of bread and flour product that you put in your mouth is sprayed by glyphosate. It's a poison. And every kernel of corn that you eat, and I love popcorn, but every kernel of corn is a GMO. I'm not 100% on this, but I was told that, like, broccoli is not even real. Like, broccoli is a man-made product. It's a GMO. So what effect is that having on our bodies? And we wonder why there's rage. Robert Kennedy Jr., that I told you, I've done some work with him. And he has a really great crew of gals that I know. And we do different functions to help promote, which he is now promoting himself. But before, he had to have groups of people helping to promote, because he traveled all over the United States in 2 buses, and they did 2 films, Vax 1 and Vax 2. And they went, and at the center of the town, people would come and say, look, my daughter's legs don't work anymore. My son now has autism. My daughter's strapped to a gurney, and she'll be like this for the rest of her life. Immediately after getting the shot. And it wasn't even the COVID shot. It was in the list of children's shots that they're supposed to get.
Yeah.
I think I got 6 shots when I was a little girl in 1965, and I believe now it's 65.
What's crazy too is the manipulation of how they just, they used to like get, the separate, like rubella, tetanus, like they would like
mumps,
the
measles,
swine flu. Yeah. Like they were all separate shots.
Yeah.
But I think the very manipulative and scary thing that they've done lately is they've mixed all of them together. So you either say yes to the one shot, and it includes a little bit of every, a list of them. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh, and this is going to go on for 18-month course. So you're going to come in every 3 months and get another dose of the shot, It's a cocktail shot. And I admit I've gone up against school nurses about this. Yeah. And I just like, what? You have got to be kidding me. What do you mean she needs more?
Would you like to know what the vaccine was in 1965 for measles and chickenpox?
What was it?
Okay. I can remember my mom saying to me, okay, your auntie's coming over this weekend with your cousins. They've got chickenpox and you guys need to get it.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay. And they came over and we got chickenpox. That's how we dealt with it. Yeah. You would bring your neighbors or friends over. Everybody would get chickenpox.
Yeah.
And then you'd itch and put calamine lotion and itch, and then you were done.
Yeah.
But that's how they did it before.
Yeah.
And now it's the fear of God is putting you, should you get chickenpox, you will die. I've had chickenpox twice.
Yeah, it's like if you and then sometimes it's even like you don't even want the inconvenience that this illness will give you, and it's like, so is that worth a shot? And the HPV is a perfect example. That's that's an STI or something, mm-hmm. right? Or it's like, why were they?
They give it to children at 12 years old in case they might be promiscuous. At 12 years old, many children don't even know what promiscuity is. They just don't live those kind of lives. And they get the shot and the parents go with it.
The really disturbing thing is that 12 years old is common knowledge for HPV shot. But for both of my children, they came in a couple hours within my children's birth with the HPV shot.
How's that possible?
They did. And it's crazy because even my leftist family members argue with me about that. And I have it on record. I proved it to one of my cousins by showing them the vaccination record. And you know what she did? She justified them. She said, oh, I can see why they would give your baby it as a baby versus 12 years old, which is when they usually give the HPV shot. It's probably because it better disperses in their body when they're a baby.
That's not how immunity works. Immunity doesn't work that way.
I was enraged when she said
that's made up.
I was like, so you acknowledge that you just got called out. You acknowledge that I just called you out. I just told you that the knowledge that you have is false. And you justified them?
I have a friend's daughter that just mentioned to me, she didn't ask me, she just mentioned, she said, yeah, I said, please don't get the COVID-19 shot. And she goes, yeah, I've been thinking, I'm 3 months pregnant. And so I've been thinking about going in and getting it. I said, I beg you, don't get it. And then she said, okay, what if I just get the flu shot? I said, no.
Just stop.
You're pregnant with a human being. Don't get a shot.
Don't get a shot.
And she's, in her mind, and she's not a leftist, she thinks she's doing the right thing for her and her baby, and that is to get immunized. But if you think about the shots that they're putting in the children, and if you're being immunized before you're born, what is the future effect of an immunization going through your umbilical cord, through your mother, into your body, when you are developing your eyes and your lungs and your kidneys and your spleen? What happens when that microscopic medication or whatever it is, because I don't even know what it is anymore. It's not what it used to be. It used to be a small amount of the disease, and that's what would build immunity. COVID-19 is an RNA derivative.
Yeah.
It's a different animal. But if you're being given that shot when you're pregnant, what is the long-term effects? So these doctors that are making these decisions, like Fauci and some of the others, they will remain nameless because there's thousands of them. They won't be around when your child is 40 years old and suffering the after effects of having been given that immunization in the womb. There's nobody that's going to pay the price but your child.
It's really awful. It's just heartbreaking, and I think it's circling back to where we're seeing what motherhood was and what motherhood is now in 2020, which is exactly what your friend's experience is, exactly what my experience has been, which is kind of just really enslaved to the doctors.
Yeah.
And then the schools are enslaved to the medical community as well. Mm-hmm. So they're just pretty much the law enforcement right now. They're the sheriffs in town. Yeah. I have an example the other day, and I brought this up a few weeks ago. So if you've heard this story, forgive me, but it was a student's parent brought me a letter, and the teacher gave it to me. I'm a part-time teacher. And it said, from Kaiser Permanente, this child blank, 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 this age blank, blank, blank has ADHD. Therefore, you need to make sure that you are handling him or her, exactly this way. You need to be doing this, that. You need to make sure that you're not being too harsh and that your lesson is not distracting the child, because they already are having trouble sitting still. They have ADHD, for God's sake. And it's just like, and I'm reading this thing and I'm just like, they're the sheriff in town.
Yeah.
They found me even at my little part-time enrichment teaching job. What, are you kidding me right now? I heard someone in a parental forum say this to RFK Jr. Parents are just being held hostage by these administrations.
Absolutely.
And the administrations are enslaved to whatever the doctors are saying. And the doctors are creating new laws, going around the Constitution, going around the courts, going around the voting process. They are creating new laws. And parents of today are like either following it blindly, resisting and getting consequences, having to be go against the grain and homeschool their children or create a co-op. I mean, it's the Wild West right now, and it's crazy. And there's a lot of children falling victim to it, and there's a lot of mothers who just feel either guilty, ashamed, or just they're infused with the crazy sauce, and they're full throttle.
And my first reaction is, that child that's coming into your classroom that has all these problems, what did they have for breakfast this morning? Because if they had tricks or for kids, then they had FDC blue, number 14, number 2 yellow, whatever the numbers that coincide with it, red dye number 4. Is that number 4?
Yeah.
And each of them have consequences in the biological makeup of that child. It causes insomnia. It causes them to be hyperactive. It causes them to have depression. Then what about all the immunizations that they took? That has all those dyes as well. Let's start with that. Let's start with the immunization, but they put that at the end instead of at the beginning. What trauma did that child have in the morning? Do they have a mother that has depression, or she's a manic mother? Sometimes women can become manic at that time of the month, or they're dealing with a death. So the children are called something.
Yeah.
They're labeled something, rather than sitting down and saying, "Hey, hon, what's going on, Bobby, in your life?
Yes.
What do you need? How can we help you? How can we be here for you? What are your thoughts?" See if you can help that child have better thoughts than the ones that they're dealing with that morning, that they're having the hyperactivity. And so...
Yeah, that would be a much more effective way to handle the child, rather than going to everyone, including each adult that the child encounters, like a teacher, and saying, you need to conform and basically let my child run this place.
And that's an isolation tactic to the child, because the child is missing important things that a child that doesn't have the hyperactivity is, hey, Johnny, you jumped up when you weren't supposed to, and you, instead of raising your hand, now you don't get to answer this question. The hyperactive kid gets the break.
Yes.
It's not fair to him. He needs to learn. You can't jump up now, or you can't. And I'm not giving advice on how to handle hyperactive kids, because I don't know. I'm just saying that I see that they're missing important things that the other children are not missing.
Yeah. And I mean, the point of it all is that nowadays, we're so far from the hearth. We can barely see it. And the administration is ruling everything. Doctors are doing whatever they want. And children's problems are being handled with a diagnosis, a pill, a treatment. Earlier today, I spent the entire mid-morning and mid-afternoon in Fresno, California. I was at a Turning Point event. Chloe Cole was speaking. She was doing a Prove Me Wrong. There were 350 people there. A bunch of protesters. And the protesters were getting in Chloe's face. I was helping Chloe. I was helping film it for her, to post it and stuff. And, you could just see the protesters in the back of the footage, and they're just sitting there. It's just like, the argument falls in on itself. They're sitting there screaming at Chloe, who's simply saying, you have options, basically. If you are feeling confused, you don't have to run out to the puberty blockers and I'm going to tell you my experience with those things. And you had there was this whole trans mob that was, they all had the Palestinian flags and everything, and the LGBT flags and the trans flags. And they were all yelling at Chloe, just because, you had that experience, stop whining about your problems. You're killing children. You're killing children by denying them these puberty blockers. You're killing them by bringing this transphobia to our campus. That's the kind of things that they were yelling at Chloe. And I think that just emphasizes on how turned around and backwards we are, is just literally the person who's trying to recommend a more natural approach to gender dysphoria and gender confusion is being yelled at by a trans mob who is saying, you're killing children because you're refusing them the surgeries. You're trying to discourage them from taking the pills and the puberty blockers. And I just think that that's the parents' battle right now.
It is. I can remember in this small town that I lived in on Long Island, that there was one neighbor who had, I don't know, I was a child, so I don't know if she had depression, but she was different from everyone else. And we knew she was different because she always wore her hat like wrong on her head.
Yeah.
You know,
she would, quirky.
Sometimes she'd have two different shoes on, and she was loved. Everybody just loved her. And they would bring her bread, and I remember she would go to the bakery, and the bread that was stale, she would buy the stale bread, and she would give us each family member in the neighborhood like a stale loaf of bread. And we would be like, oh, this is so delicious. We love this bread. This is amazing. And we would hug her, and then my mom would bring her food, and all the neighbors would bring her food. And we just took really good care of her because we knew that she had needs, you know, that were different. That's how we handle needs. Yes. Not medication, not isolation, not putting her in a hospital, but having her right there among the community, you know, and being part of the community with us. And we were taught to be very respectful towards her, very respectful. And I remember asking my mom, hey, Mom, are we going to eat this bread? She said, no. And I said, why is she giving us this bread? And she said, don't worry about it. You just carry it home.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I carried it home.
That's
how we did it.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That is fantastic because that is exactly the kind of love that someone who's dealing with personal issues or confusion or whatever they may, chemical imbalance, to be an active member in their community and, you know, display kindness and gentleness. And frankly, that's what I do with, you know, the people that I've, you know, like the one who handled me, like I've been handling it like that. Now it's not easy. Especially when, you know, it seems like I'm the only, you know, when it seems like we're the only force in that person's life who's actually treating them that way. But ideally, you know, that's where I believe a church community comes in because it's like, then you have multiple voices enforcing that love, enforcing that, you know, just reiterating that love and just kind of saying, you know what, it's like, it's showing the love of God to people.
It is. And
I think that's what we so desperately need. And people are really confused right now. And oh my goodness, we are already almost at the hour.
And if I could just add one more thing that I think will bring a lot of value to both yourself and to your viewers as well. There was no autism. Okay? None. No one knew anyone who had autism in the 60s. It's kind of started towards the latter part of the 70s, but even among my own community over here in Manhattan Beach, I didn't know of anyone that had an autistic child. Back on Long Island, never heard of the word. And we also did not have dementia. We did not have Alzheimer's. So this lady who was older, the one that I told you about, she had her quirks. But she would still take the bus to the bakery to pick up all these bakery goods. Yeah. And in her mind, I guess she figured, oh, they'll just cut the bad part off. You know? Because she had no bread during World War II, right? And so what's a little bit of mold on a piece of bread?
Yeah, that puts things into perspective.
She wasn't coming from a dementia place. She was coming from a place of handling what you have and doing the best with what you have. I'm sure of it. So even her with her quirky little thing, she wasn't a dementia person and she wasn't an Alzheimer's either. She was just a little different.
Yeah.
And now that I think about it, she probably would have been happy in World War II to have some bread with mold on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than not eating it at all. So maybe that's why she did that. Yeah. But we never asked. We never pressured her or said anything to her. We just loved her for it and accepted her gifts and gave her gifts in return.
Yes, and that's fantastic. And my grandma, who was diagnosed with dementia, you know, this is 20, maybe she got diagnosed in 2015, I think. And me and my mom and my dad, we took care of her up until the bitter end there. I mean, it was bittersweet.
And did she have, was she vaccinated?
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And
she even had the COVID vax.
She probably took the flu shot. I've never had a flu shot ever.
That was, partially that was because, she was on hospice. And the hospice had certain rules. And we were her caregivers, but we
Right.
were not her medical professionals. And that's another case of the medical, professionals coming in and just, making rules.
we really didn't go to the doctor very often, and the reason is because my grandmother, self-proclaimed expert with herbs. She
Yeah.
was just an expert with herbs. If you said the right side of my nose is clogged, she'd be like, and she would make you
I
do
had a
something.
lady like that.
Yeah. The only thing she did that was hysterical is she couldn't remember how to say Vicks Vapor Rub.
Yeah.
And she was like the Greek family spraying the Windex on everything to cure it. Her cure-all for everything was Vicks Vapor Rub.
Yeah.
And that, it went in your nose, it went in your throat, it went in your ears. She did everything with it, but she called it Vic Vaporui because she didn't really hear the Vicks Vapor. And so to this day, we were like, "Did you get your Vicky Vaporui?" We kind of giggle about that.
Oh,
but,
that's so cute.
But Grandma knew every herb that she came from Cuba with, and she researched it here until she found it. And so we didn't go to the doctor because as soon as we had a symptom, there went the tea, and we did what she said.
Yes. It's so
And then
important.
We got well within like 24 hours.
The person in my life who is like that is my mother-in-law. She's like, she has a thing for everything. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. But oh my goodness. So we have talked about all these different generations of women and kind of just the, I don't even know what the word is. Digression? Is that the word
I don't
looking
know.
for?
I'm hoping we're not digressing.
Yeah, of motherhood.
Evolving. Yeah.
Of motherhood. And it's really sad. And that's, personally, and this is part of my journey on this podcast, on pretty much everything I do, is I believe we will eventually come back to these traditional values.
Well, think of it. You are. Look out of where you came to do exactly what you're doing, and that is embracing the traditional values of the mother with the apron and the kids at home. You are doing exactly that. You're not the only one. You're one of thousands and hopefully hundreds of thousands.
Yes.
To bring it back, because where we are, it's not working.
Yes, it's not working. Absolutely. That is so true. Well, Marlene, this has been
you so
wonderful.
much. You're amazing.
Oh, you're amazing too. Thank you for
what a
making the trip.
privilege.
I hope you enjoyed your boba. And
Yes.
if there's anywhere that anyone can find you, if they want to hear more about you or your journey or have a question for you, is there like an email or a social media that they can go to?
I use my real estate email. I hope that's okay. And it's homesformarlene@gmail.com. HOMES, the number 4. Marlene, MARLENE @gmail.com. And we didn't get to talk too much about this, but I'm a big Instagrammer, and I'm also on Facebook too under Marlene Silva. So if you find me, I'll delete some people and put you on. But I also have something called 60 and Fabulous, above 60 and Fabulous on Instagram, and it's all dedicated to I'm going to be 70 years old in 2 weeks, to how you can be 70 years old and still be fabulous and do everything that you want to do and not think of a number as the dominant issue in your life that tells you what you can and cannot do. Do everything you want, do it now, and do it big.
I love that. Thank you. What an incredible message.
welcome.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And if you have any questions for me or want to find any of our other socials, go to 180shift.org. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. God bless.
God bless. Thank you.
Yay.
You're awesome.
Have fun. You have one day. Woo-hoo. We did a whole hour.